My lords, the galaxy is full of primitives, but are all primitives equal? No, they're not. Today, we are going to, via a battle simulation, determine who is the strongest of all the primitive species. And while that goes on, we'll discuss some of the rarer of the potential events that can occur when one is dealing with primitive people. I'm sure we've all seen the cycles of nuclear war, the spontaneous formings of a hive mind singularity, or robotic uprisings, but I'd bet a large stack of my energy credits you won't have heard what I've got in store for you today. But first, the simulation. We have a galaxy jam-packed full of primitive species who've yet to achieve faster than light travel. The first to do so is of course going to be at a marvellous advantage, since they will, for a time, have free roam of the entire galaxy to explore and build up their battle fleets. As you can see, the galaxy is littered with Pre-FTLs. The hive mind fallen empire will no doubt try and police them somewhat, but I would keep my eye on humanity in the northern cluster of the galaxy. They're in the machine age after all, and I have no doubt will be a serious player in this simulation. In any case, let's get into the events, and I'll let the simulation run in the background. We begin with a somewhat amusing incident whereby a group of Pre-FTLs refused to believe that we were in fact an alien species. This is codenamed the Non-Believers. Even after meeting us, the Non-Believers refused to accept the existence of extraterrestrial life. They claim that we're not interstellar visitors at all, but subterranean dwellers who climb to the planet's surface through holes in the ground. Their planet is thought to be hollow, and they believe that we fly inside this central cavity using our spaceships. This baffling belief is hindering our diplomatic efforts. Everything we say or do is met with the utmost suspicion. And it felt like an obvious solution, so we offered to bring their most influential skeptics into space. Well, turns out the non-believers don't believe in space. Either they think the sky is a glass dome filled with mirrors, stars are rays of sunlight reflected from the mirrors, as are other celestial bodies, and even if we were to bring them to our own homeworld, they would probably claim they had never even left their home planet, or something equally absurd. There must be a way to sway them. Several weeks have gone by while we ponder this, and we're getting mixed news from the non-believers' planet. While they don't think that we are visitors from the centre of the Earth anymore, they do now think that their world is flat, and people like us live on hanging cities beneath it. I'm not quite sure what's worse, the cave dweller theory, or a planet of flat earthers. We decided to leave them there for the minute, and almost a year went by before we heard some more news, and it was incredible news. Someone was hiding under the surface after all. Subterranean armies of a previously unknown alien species are pouring out of the caves, and they're attacking the so-called non-believers. It's a full-scale invasion. I feel like we've seen this one before. After a vicious war, the non-believers had been completely annihilated by the subterranean race that now occupies their old cities. The newly dominant species is aware of our presence, and in something of a mixed blessing, obviously does not believe that we came from the centre of the planet, nor that their planet is flat. This outcome may have actually been a win for the Commonwealth of Man. Okay, my lords, we are now 50 years into the simulation, and we've seen a number of empires awake, 5 to be specific. The first awakening came in 2217 with the Deepling Collective, a lithoid hive mind. Will this give them an advantage on the galactic stage? I would certainly think so. However, only a few years later, the Alverman Star Empire also awoke. Oddly perhaps, the Alverman are also lithoid in nature, and on top of this were life-seeded as well. I wonder if there's any particular reason why 2 lithoids awoke before the rest of the galaxy, or is it just luck? In any case, we can see them expanding as the years progress, building up a nice empire for themselves, largely with little to no resistance. In 2240, the Habinante Unified Worlds spawn into existence. I imagine that they were contacted by one of the 2 active empires, though I suspect they won't end up doing an awful lot. And then by the time we get to 2249, we've had 2 more empires awake, the Ignatarian Citizen Compact and the Overian Multitude. The Overian Multitude is, again, a lithoid, and this time a hive mind. Feel like there is a pattern here. Perhaps lithoids just know how to get out of bed early. They are subterranean though, rather than life-seeded. The Ignerian citizen compact are yet another lithoid species. Something is afoot here. Either this galaxy has a large amount of lithoids in it, or lithoids are just smarter than regular organics. This is bizarre indeed. I'll run you through another primitive event, and let's see if any regular organic empires awaken, or perhaps machine empires. Moving back to the events from the galaxy, and this one actually relates to the dreaded Blorg. Not long after first contact, one of our ambassadors went through the following, which has been designated, quite simply, as stuffed. Unexpected news from Blorg today, as a familiar face greeted us. Our own. Recently, the Pre-FTL Blorgs appear to have been captivated by our own form. Something about our ears seemed to remind them of their young. They tell us that we are cute, or kawaii. Already, stuffed toys with exaggerated ears have become a widespread commodity across their cities. Members of our ambassadorial team are both disturbed and amused. The trade envoy suggests imposing royalties on the product immediately. Moving on to Sweet Tooth. One of the commodities we have been trading with this newly discovered Pre-FTL species is a tasty but very ordinary food back on Unity. Essentially, it's a donut. At least, it's just a donut to our species. However, this basic sweet treat has proven to be a very powerful psychotrope for this species. It's also highly addictive and incredibly dangerous. Unscrupulous merchants have been moving absurd quantities of donuts at exorbitant prices. As a result, many of the locals are plunging into a stupor, and in the worst cases, death. Death by donuts, it would seem. There was some debate. Do we forbid trade and set up a blockade? Do we provide medical assistance? Or people die every day? Business is business after all. Ultimately, given their technological level, and really this was our fault, we pledged our medical resources to the treatment of addiction of these donuts. And of course we won't be trading with them anymore. In other news, invasive species. When we returned from a recent diplomatic visit, we discovered that we'd picked up some unusual stowaways. An infestation of small, wingless, wriggling arthropods had found their way aboard our shuttle. They move fast and are tiny enough that our sensors cannot detect them. Given their rapid breeding, it has become increasingly difficult to contain the invasion. Unfortunately, the species is a symbol of plenty to the people of the Pre-FTLs where we picked them up from. How we respond to this invasion could certainly affect our relations with the people. Realistically, we had two options. We could inform the planet's rulers that we would be exterminating the infestation, or we could deal with it quietly, not wanting to insult them. We decided that ultimately, honesty and directness was the best policy, so we confronted them regarding the ongoing arthropod infestation. While they were taken back by our directness, they ultimately appreciated the honesty. They apologised for not being more thorough in their decontamination process and offered us a tried and tested cruelty-free pest repellent that's very popular on their home planet. And now back to the simulation. So we find ourselves just coming into the turn of the century, 2297 as it stands, and not a huge amount has happened, it would appear, in the galaxy since we last visited it. So it appears no new empires have woken up, no new Pre-FTLs at least. We still have the Alvermans and the Deepling Collective, who were the first to awaken. They are slowly expanding into the galaxy. The Habernante, of course, haven't done anything. What has happened, though, is the Deepling and the Ignerians have formed a pan-galactic alliance, a federation. It'll be interesting to see how that shapes the galaxy. The Overian multitude is still relatively small and half the power of the others, but what may have a huge effect on the galaxy is the Primitives have been unleashed. For those who don't know, the Primitives are fanatical purifiers. They're related to a specific event where someone has locked their planet, Rish, behind a shield, and you can go along and you can open the planet. Well, it appears that is what the AI have decided to do. They've unleashed the fanatic purifier Primitives on the galaxy. And it's interesting to note that they are, I guess, the only organic representation in the galaxy because everybody else is lithoid. It's also interesting to note that no organic primitive has woken up yet. So I wonder what's going on there. In any case, I think we will probably watch the Alverman Star Empire continue to grow. along with the Deepling Collective. They are the two main powerhouses in the galaxy, although given the Federation, it would be very interesting to see what happens. It's also interesting to see if the Prick team manage to thrive, and I'll remind you that Sol is currently 2 hyperlane jumps away from their borders, so humanity probably aren't going to do very well in this galaxy. But let's get back to primitive events, and I'll leave the simulation running. Moving on to the misuse of technology. To foster goodwill with these pre-FTLs, we agreed to share our matter replication technology. Of course, we expected them to use it to reduce resource scarcity, but we are now receiving reports that the technology has been weaponized. The inhabitants have arrived at the bold idea of reversing the functionality of a replication unit, so rather than assembling pre-programmed matter, the device can now be used to disassemble living things at the atomic level. Of course, some may say what they choose to do with the technology is not our concern, but I would disagree. Clearly, it is our concern. They cannot be trusted to use it correctly, and thus we will confiscate the tech. Our agents arrived just as the pre-FTLs were finalizing their handheld atomic disintegrator. They were told in no uncertain terms that this was not the intended use for the matter replication unit that we gifted them. As expected, they were reluctant to part with the technology. Tempers flared, and their government has labelled the confiscation an aggressive act. We will not be trusting them in the future. Let's move on now to the different flavours of government. The pre-FTL species we met today were shocked to learn that our government differs from their own. Incredibly, throughout their planet's history, its people have never experienced such a power structure. Obviously, this raises concerns regarding our ability to engage in effective diplomacy. They have, after all, never experienced a non-diplomatic form of government. Clearly, they need to learn why imperialist is so great and powerful, and they have yet to experience the taste of an empire. After instructing them in our political philosophy, the pre-FTLs have taken steps towards reforming their government in line with our own. These initiatives are taking place on a planetary scale, bringing in a new era for this species. To mark this dramatic political overhaul, the new government has held a parade in our honour. Maybe they will get the hang of imperialism quite quickly. Moving on now to market fluctuations, also known as space stonks. The revelation that these pre-FTLs were not alone in the universe came as a shock to many on their homeworld. Not surprisingly, the event has had severe economic effects, with financial institutions across the planet in freefall. There has been a marked decrease in the planet's standard of living, and arguably it is our fault. Of course, there are options available to us. Do we bail them out, or do we trust in the market? Given our own capitalistic tendencies, we decided to trust in the market. Of course, our trust in the market to right itself has been a disaster. Some are calling it a once-in-a-generation collapse, although I feel like we've seen quite a lot of those recently. In fact, conditions on the planet have never been worse, and the people there are clamouring for increased government oversight in the financial sector. Clearly, the market does not know best after all. My lords, given that we now have 10 active empires in our galaxy, I thought it might be valuable to provide some insight on the differences between pre-sapient and pre-FTL species. As you can see in the southern border of the galaxy, 2 new empires have reached the status of FTL, and it appears that the Alverman Star Empire has allowed them to reach this level and gifted them said system. The differences between pre-FTLs and pre-sapients are as follows. Pre-FTLs are civilizations that have yet to develop the technology necessary for interstellar space travel, i.e. faster than light travel. Generally we'll find them in different stages, or perhaps ages, and we can watch them grow up and eventually become fully fledged interstellar empires. Pre-FTL civilizations have approximately a 3% chance to spawn in each habitable system on the base galaxy settings. The earliest form of pre-FTLs you can find are Stone Age primitives. They have essentially mastered fire and developed a rudimentary language, but yet to see any evidence of metallurgy or written communication. They will of course advance through the Bronze Age, Iron Age, Medieval stage, and eventually Renaissance. By the time they get to the Renaissance, scientific knowledge will begin to increase at a rapid rate, and the inventions of things like gunpowder will revolutionize warfare. The Steam Age will unlock the steam engine, which has far-reaching effects on society, and they will stand on the cusp of an industrial revolution. The Industrial Age, Machine Age, and Atomic Age will soon follow, culminating in the early Space Age. This would be an approximation of where Earth would have been in 2026. A civilization at this point will have primitive satellites orbiting their homeworld and will have completed manned space missions, though generally just in low orbit of their planet. Perhaps they visited the odd moon. In contrast, we have Pre-Sapience. These are species with intelligence, but have not quite achieved sapience yet. It will take millions of years for them to become sapient, and of course, spacefaring empires can accelerate the process if they wish. Pre-Sapience you'll find are a little bit more common throughout the galaxy, with approximately a 5% chance to spawn on each habitable planet. It is unlikely that we will live long enough to see a pre-sapient species become a fully fledged interstellar empire. And now back to an update on the simulation. It seems that the simulation has not gone well for humanity. Sol has been taken over by the Primitives, and it is very likely that Earth is currently being invaded and mankind being consumed. Not ideal. The Alvaman Star Empire still dominates the galaxy, however, and they're currently at war with the Federation, the Pan-Galactic Alliance, although given their fleet power they certainly appear to be holding their own. I do find it slightly remarkable how there are two clear dominant empires in the galaxy, although they were the ones to wake up first after all, so perhaps it's not that unusual. If you had to make a bet, I would assume, given the power of the Federation, that they might beat the Alvaman Star Empire, but time will tell. It will be interesting to see if anyone else comes to the Alvaman Star Empire's aid, and what happens to the Primitives, although it does seem that they're locked in somewhat with the High Fallen Empire. Maybe if they'd have spawned in a different part of the galaxy, they might be more powerful. But let's get back to some events. Moving on to Miracle Hagglers. The Pre-FTL species on this newly discovered desert planet have proven to be incredibly adept traders. Our own merchants are learning the hard way that the locals are both savvy and persuasive, and they're not very happy about it. On the other hand, several of our own economists are convinced the behaviours of the Pre-FTLs could indeed be learned from. And finally, we have land grabs. We've received concerning economic reports from a Pre-FTL species. Our merchants have been trading with them, and when the deal was signed, measures were put in place to ensure the sovereignty of the locals. It appears some of our own people are skirting the law to buy up vast quantities of land through local strawmen. At the current rate, within a generation, the planet will be wholly owned by private traders. Clearly this was not in the spirit of our agreement. The sales will be revoked and the culprits fined and punished. That last event brings us nicely onto the final stage of this galaxy. Just past 2370, I've sped the simulation up a little bit, we begin to see the Alvaman Star Empire really step it up. They are completely subsuming the Ignarians, and it appears dominating that Federation. As we can see, they are over 300,000 fleet power by now. By 2400, they have almost completely wiped out the Federation entirely. The Primitives still interestingly remain alive despite being fanatical purifiers, but I think the clear winner here is the Alvaman. It's also remarkable to see just how quickly they snowball out of control. A mere 30 years later, and they are pushing 800,000 fleet power. We have the crisis still to spawn, and I wonder if they'll be able to deal with it. It appears the Alvaman have completely annihilated its two largest rivals in a dominant victory. I suspect they will have absolutely no problem dealing with the crisis when it arrives. And indeed, unsurprisingly, we were correct. The contingency spawned and didn't even manage to make it out of their 4 original spawning sites. The Alvaman Star Empire absolutely deleted them. So, the question we asked at the start of the report, who's the strongest primitive? Well, that will be the Alvaman Star Empire. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, I appreciate your support, thank you for watching, and if you're not subscribed, please consider it.